most of the times a fiction film's Academy campaign budget is 2 times or 3 times the budget of a film.
Really?
It's that high.
Wow.
And you know, my favorite films are films that are never about the plot. They're more about character or atmosphere.
And the stories you were saying, that the experiences at the Oscar with people maybe whom you wanted to always meet and finally met.
We were, everybody's talking to somebody, and Roger Deakins was there, who's also a huge hero. And then Ali comes to me and says that, Bhai, sabka baap aa gaya, something. And I turn, and it's almost like even in that room, jahan pe itne sare stars hai, Tom Cruise has come in, and it's like he's the sun. Like, people are orbiting around. Look, everybody's standing and listening now, right? Like, everybody's sitting at the back there. But suddenly, like, the story of Tom Cruise is just like... and it's almost like it felt like he's perfected the 1 minute conversation of really like holding your hand, give me your hand. And he'll do the thing and he'll be like... And he'll be fully focused for that 1 minute, okay? And you can't believe that Tom Cruise is holding your hand. Yeah. And... no, we can start with the conversation of your forthcoming film.
Okay.
You were saying that your references would be mainly Chris Marker?
I mean, when I started making it, there was no reference as such. But when I was almost close to finishing it on the edit table, then Amit Datta, he told me to watch Chris Marker's films and also watch this. I forgot the name of that film. A filmmaker writes a letter to his daughter, which is a very, very good film. And that I felt is a very, very close to what I am also trying to say, which is like not having a particular singular structure, but also kind of in a montage memory device, like using cinema in that form.
This is such a classic first film sort of a form that I think is very... It feels like a fever dream. Like my first Cities of Sleep. Obviously, we start with... I had no money. I was cutting myself, doing color myself, doing sound myself, doing subtitles myself, all on my iPod.
Edit also.
Everything. Cut it myself. Well, there were... Every now and then there was somebody who'd come. There was one editor who was attached and stuff. But everything on my iPad in my bedroom, basically. Just sitting and doing everything constantly. And it feels like a fever dream. And it's really funny how a lot of this, like what one is most attracted to is this kind of a kaleidoscopic, stream of consciousness sort of a thing, because you can play on the edit most. And so for a lot of filmmakers, I feel like this kind of a Chris Marker sort of style becomes very important in the first film.
But it's very difficult to understand when have you finished it because you never know, because every time I think it's not finished because there is no exact finished, marker.
No? But it's not finished. It's as simple as that. I mean, even now with all that beats, I do a re-edit, and basically you stop cutting when you run out of money, or when you feel like
motivation is over.
No motivation. I mean, for me, when the deadline is on you and when the festival is saying ki, basically you keep cutting till you get through a festival, and then they're saying send it in, right? That's how it usually goes. But that first sort of a thing, that first initial foray is very interesting, because that feels like you cancelling different pathways of grammar that you thought you were comfortable in, but then it is, acha, ye nahi hai mera dialect, and then you arrive at something that you feel more at home with. And obviously and this sense that obviously the self is a moving target, it's something that you only understand in practice and not theoretically, right? So it's only then that you realize, I thought I was this kind of filmmaker, but not this, like neti, and arrive at something which you feel like you're more at home with.
I think that process started through my online videos that I make. So I finally, I was very confused as to what I should make. So when I was in JNU also, I made a film. It was titled Hostel Ka Kamra in 2012 or 13. I was trying, but...
How long was it?
I mean, it was, 25 or 30 minutes. It was basically inspired from Jim Jarmusch's Coffee and Cigarette. So basically, in the similar way, people are having conversation in the hostel. So that I made it. And I also made many films afterwards. But I couldn't really understand what exactly is the language which I want to try to communicate my films into, or what would be the vocabulary. So it took me a lot, but I think when I started online and through that reaction and that whole process, I finally arrived at certain. I said,
I really
okay,
love
this
that
is
kind of, I was just reading recently, Edward Said has this book called, fuck, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but something on late style it's called. And what he does is basically he's looking at the last works of well-known thinkers, artists and so on, but what people do right at the end. And similarly, when you look at first works, it's very interesting, and like there's some filmmakers who are able to hold on to that kind of firstness, like beginner's mindset sort of strengths. And Jim Jarmusch is one of those people where the films have this kind of a incomplete, elliptical, inchoate playfulness, where it's almost like the plot is not a dhacha or a cage that has imprisoned it. You're not doing this thing where हर scene का एक logic है कि it has to plot को आगे ले. Every scene is a donkey that carries the load of the plot forward. And that's the thing that somehow sort of hammers in the a well-made film, right? But in a lot of these other, like Jim Jarmusch hai or Chris Mark hai, there's a kind of radical openness that one sees that's very exciting, and that a lot of filmmakers have in their early film when the work is raw and unvarnished. But over time, as one gets more money, it sort of gets, you know what I mean? It gets packed in.
In fact, that was something I was thinking in the morning कि maybe cinema जो है वो अकेली ऐसी फील्ड है जिसमें एक्सपीरियंस के बाद देयर आर मोर चांसेस ऑफ मेकिंग यू बैड फिल्म्स. Like in most of the industry it's saying that experience हासिल करो और आप ये skill हासिल करो, then you'll become better over the time. But in case of filmmaking, we see like most filmmakers make their first films are very very good, excellent, but then also there is a certain kind of deterioration, and in like this I see in the most filmmakers कि end पे आते तो वो deterioration एक next level पे चला जाता.
Well, I don't know if experience is the culprit here. Insofar as, to me, it feels like there are two trajectories that I can think of for my favorite filmmakers. जैसे कि, for a lot of filmmakers' bodies of work, you feel like in their initial work, it's pure instinct. It's pure, raw, unvarnished impulse into the world. Intuition, impulse, instinct, right? It's somewhere in the later part of so many filmmakers that one feels it, that somehow that initial spark of effervescence, of kind of pure instinct, intuition, वो कम हो गया और पर craft का muscle या might अभी भी बचा है. So it feels like a kind of a empty formalism तब कि बहुत craft है, मतलब मेरे toolkit में बहुत सारा skill है, but actually वो that kind of a searing relation, that singular relationship to the world has now lessened. And one often feels this, right? So I was mentioning Edward Said's last book about the last works of people, and I feel this about a lot of, like, when you look at the last work of, say, Kiarostami, the film in Japan, I'm forgetting the name, you feel like there's a touch on something that feels very sophisticated, and the craft is there, but something else that you really loved in the early work, a kind of embeddedness or grounding in the world, is missing. So that's one thing. The other thing is actually just money, which just really does some damage to a filmmaker's career. I mean, just think of, in India, think of a lot of our mainstream filmmakers who had something good going, and the minute they get this big budget, something happens, and it sort of, I think, brings to bear the old dictum that limitations really help or flower creativity, which is कि कुछ नहीं करना, बस एक single take में film लो, and suddenly you get ideas which are, or you have three elements and stitch together a film like it. So there is something to be said about the value of limitations or boundaries to really help the playing field of ideas to thrive.
Like, for example, Aki Kaurismäki's recent film I've seen. So I was very surprised by that because he's one of my favorite filmmakers. And his recent is, I think, अभी old age में जो बना है, it was very good.
Leaves or
Fallen Leaves. It was very good. So I was surprised by that. So there are a few examples. Even Jarmusch is also making good films.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's not a rule. I mean, I have to say, I didn't like the Kaurismäki film.
So you didn't like it?
No.
Okay.
But I found but I mean, that doesn't mean anything, right? It's like sometimes really late films and age. I mean, one can't really have a blueprint or a kind of gospel truth about this ever, right? It's like, um, like I remember reading this. Kurosawa wrote a letter to Bergman saying that life begins at the age of 80, where he quotes his favorite painter who made their best work after the age of 80. And sometimes late work is really, really interesting. Sometimes it's full of lamentation. Then it becomes less about the work, but somehow some kind of an intangible quality that some films try and access. Like something which feels like mournful or doleful or a kind of lamentation. Quaresmark is not that age, of course.
I think you also talk about Herzog, that you didn't
Herzog
like.
is a different. Well, we'll get into that properly. That's a
Okay.
whole sort of a thing. But I want to, because we were talking about your film,
Yeah.
yet to come, so
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor too much. But what do you feel is the molten core in terms of feelings
Okay.
that you want to, it's like there's one kind of essence which you feel like इसके बारे में I'm most excited, like, or this idea or concept or feeling or texture you're most interested by.
I haven't like about my film. I haven't theorized it that much because I'm in the editing process and I'm yet to figure out exactly where it is going. But mostly it is one of the very alternative viewpoint on Rajasthan first of all, because there is बचपन से जब मैं देखता रहा हूँ राजस्थान का एक बहुत ही क्लीशे रिप्रेजेंटेशन है सो आई एम सेइंग समथिंग एल्स अबाउट राजस्थान सो फर्स्ट थिंग दैट आई एम एक्साइटेड अबाउट एंड द सेकंड थिंग आई एम रियली looking forward to, I'm especially of the reaction of the people, is that कि एक marginalized identity की फिल्म मेकिंग इतनी डल क्यों होती है. I don't understand why they are so dull. There is the filmmaker also are only focusing on atrocity या फिर इन चीज़ों के बारे में या फिर एक ग्रिम हर चीज़ को एक ग्रिम बना के क्यों. So my film is about joy. So it's about people celebrating. There is a lot of humor, there is a lot of life, and yet there is a inherent sadness of being a Dalit in this country. So that would be something new. That's what I think, because इस तरह का presentation like Dalit life को दिखाने का may not happened अभी तक. So let's see. But I don't know.
It sounds very nice. It sounds very exciting.
So the theme of that is the idea of joy as a protest. So one of my article there was a line that when pleasures are forbidden, then happy Dalit is itself an act of resistance. So it is based on that. That is the
Idea.
core idea. So I'm just following that through that memory device and everything. So that is the. But let's see. But this was also my question.
Very nice. It sounds very, very nice.
Thank you, Shaunak.
Are you like? Was it painful? Like, has it been like a
No.
painful process?
No. It was very happy.
Well, that's rare.
Because I was enjoying it and I was editing थोड़ा daily. So मुझे पता भी नहीं था कि कुछ बनेगा इसमें से. बस I was just editing. So इससे 2.5 साल से I was editing, मतलब on and off. So it finally became something, and I think it's interesting. But I look forward to comments of people कि किस तरह से आया. But that was also my question कि अगर like sometimes we think that like there are many people who think that कि बहुत ज़्यादा if you theorize या फिर scholarly जो thing है. So इस पे मेरा एक question ये था कि normally जैसे ये भी एक चीज़ बोली जाती है कि बहुत ज़्यादा if you become scholarly or if you over theorize, then there is the problem that your instinct of the filmmaking might lose. जैसे एक हर्जोग का भी कोट है बहुत ही फनी कि academia is death of cinema is not the art of scholars but of illiterates. Obviously it is said in a very different context, not exactly, but there is this constant issue of scholarly thing and filmmaking as following your instinct. So since you've done 2 type of courses, so how did you, like, do you think about these 2 elements, or how?
Yeah, I mean, obviously get asked about this all the time. Okay. But firstly, let's keep the Herzogian quote out of the this thing, because that's entirely about context, and I'm sure we'll talk about Herzog, and everybody has big views, and I definitely have
definitely.
The thing about let me put it this way: it's almost like I realized through the course of this film that it feels like it's almost like a schizoid partition between 2 different parts of my brain. The world of my academics and PhD, which of course I did literally here, like 25 feet away, it feels like it's very helpful in the initial part when I'm thinking of an idea or a concept, and you really have the conceptual and emotional cardio to really try and illuminate an object from different, so you're really focusing. Having said that, when you're making the work, when you're out in the world, and documentary is so often a kind of a unscripted, like it's like an embrace of the radical unscriptedness of the world, that you really want to like keep your, because so much of the academic impulse basically is to frame or contain or domesticate or catalog the object, right? कि दुनिया में phenomenon है, उसको किस तरह से हम, it's always a kind of belated impulse, right? There is phenomenon and उसको हम किस तरह से frame करें, contain करें, समझ के box करें, taxonomize करें, right? That's really the instinct. So it always comes at one remove. Whereas when you're filming, especially non-fiction, you're often at the, you're at the bleeding edge of obsolescence. You're at the bleeding edge of now, right? Ki you're interested in literally purely guttural gestures. You're interested in a yawn. You're interested angrai ka kya. You know, you're interested in us tarah se kya. You're waiting for life to reward you with accidents and contingencies, and you're waiting for कि तुम खड़े और चील चश्मा लेके चली गई, right? You're waiting for things like that. And that, if you can't be shooting and saying Foucault, you can't do that, right? You can't. That's a different part of your brain which you actually have to reject. You have to be pure instinct, and you have to be pure open-mouthed wonder, and it's a kind of enchantment with what you're saying that is not analytic, it's pre-analytic. So but when you're editing, the work of academia sort of not but the analytic brain comes jumping back, because you want to editorialize, and you're interested in thinking about arcs and narrative and meaning making, right? I do say this, but that's what I used to think about editing, but my experience of editing was totally different with this film, because I cut in Copenhagen with this really wonderful editor called Charlotte Bengtson, who cut Act of Killing and like just these master works, and she's a real master, and she has a totally different style of edit, which is that for me, maybe it's because I come from cinema studies theoretically or whatever, for me एक shot के बाद दूसरा shot के बाद तीसरा shot क्या mean करता है, it's really about the meaning of the shot, whereas for her she'd always be like forget the meaning, and she'd be more interested in a kind of a gut based emotional edit, so she would be more interested in what are you feeling at this point in terms of what the audience is emotionally feeling in this point in the arc of the film. Not ki is shot ka kya meaning hai. And very often what happens is that the academic impulse is to kind of semiotically break down ki ye is shot ka ye matlab hai, right? And that's not taking into account a broader emotional journey per se.
But that feeling is like collectively what you're feeling while looking at the edit?
Not always. And her ears are more attuned to listening to the emotional than mine was, and I tended to be a far more cerebral, top-heavy person because of the academic training. So I would always be like, what does this mean, right? Whereas she would be like, but that doesn't matter. It's like, what are you feeling in terms of the other levels of meaning? Ki it doesn't matter कि character यहाँ पे क्या बोल रहा है या फिर character का क्या, none of that. There is a texture or tone in this scene of some magenta wall at the back which is really nice, and it's making you feel something, and you have to be open to it, and that requires a different kind of a instinctive approach जो मेरे पास नहीं था पहले. And yeah anyway, but all of which is to say that it's like different toolkits, and if I use the toolkits together, so academics becomes my enemy when I'm shooting, it's my friend when I'm planning, it's a decent acquaintance when I'm editing, and it's a really close friend when I'm doing interviews or analysis later. But for about 3 years in the middle when I was shooting, I really had to shut down that part of my brain. But having said that, I will disclaim and say that this whole idea कि अगर आप ज़्यादा scholarly बन गए तो, that I feel is also a wrong approach, because you think of the scholarly as something that is outside of your body. But actually, at least my favorite people, like practitioners of ideas, are all people जिनका एक organic या intuitive ताल्लुक है with their ideas. If you're reading, say, one of my favorite thinkers is a French thinker called Jacques Rancière. Now, if you're reading Knights of Labour, there's a direct connection between, there's a touch of authentic. It's not something at far remove, and there's then a kind of a, then even scholarship or dense academic writing can become like literary prose. Yeah, and these are not mutually exclusive categories. It's not like either art or poetry or cinema hai, or either, like the best work will always sort of concatenate. There'll always sort of, there will be the artistic in the academic and the academic in. Often this happens, no?
What do you think about Delhi as a space for cinematic exploration? Because there are not many filmmakers who have explored Delhi. मतलब जो भी गेज हैं वो बहुत ही लिमिटेड हैं, कुछ वेस्ट दिल्ली में कुछ बना दिया टाइप का, या फिर कुछ क्राइम से इसको रिलेटेड कर सकते हैं, बट एक इंटरनल गेज दिल्ली को देखने की इज़ वेरी वेरी लिमिटेड. या फिर हमारे सिनेमा में तो इनफैक्ट बॉम्बे के बाहर ही हमको जो चीज़ें हैं वो बहुत ही कम देखने को मिली हैं. सो दिल्ली से व्हाट काइंड ऑफ रिलेशनशिप यू हैव एज अ फिल्म?
I think as you know, both the films have been in Delhi, and I've worked with the same directorial team for almost 2 films. Like for 10 years, it's been the same set of people.
Like the crew?
Yeah, direction crew, not So obviously, Series of Sleep was a very tiny crew, and a lot of those people also worked. Most of those people also worked on All That Breathes, and all of these, including me, are people who were very embedded in the vernacular and colloquial cultures of the city. Sab yahi ke hain. We've all, like one knows basic, thick description of the city. So in a way, it's almost like I worry that I won't be able to make films ever abroad or somewhere far off, because it's like that kind of a, like bilkul something which means 3 things only in this precinct will not be as legible to me. That my grid of intelligibility is very, very located here. And so my first film was obviously looking at the city of Delhi through the lens of sleep. And so it was looking at the city of Delhi through a horizontal axis. Yes. Whereas the second film was looking at the city of Delhi through a vertical axis, through the lens of birds, or through kind of avian this thing. And it started with also something that is irreducibly specific to Delhi, which is that it started with this kind of idea of this tone or texture of pervasive greyness that we feel in Delhi through the winter months, right? This kind of a pervasive, grey, hazy, monochromatic, dystopic sort of a thing that laminates our lives, where every time you look up, the sun is this diffused blot, and it's just a hazy monochrome postcard of grey. And you have these lazy black dots gliding slowly in the sky, which are the black kites. And that's how it started. I was stuck in a traffic jam in Chirag, Delhi, and I happened to look up, and I distinctly got this impression that one of these black dots was falling to the sky, from the sky to the ground. And I literally googled like, where do birds that fall off the sky in Delhi go to, and the work of the brothers came up, and that's how it sort of started. So it's as situated in the context of Delhi as possible. And the truth is that no matter what, I mean, I've lived in different spurts in different cities and different countries, but I keep living here, and the truth is that I really like living here. And the truth, and it feels,
despite of it being a very difficult city in terms of weather and everything.
The truth is that it feels counterintuitive because of everything, because of a kind of climate of constant anger and constant, like, of course, the air and all of that. But the truth is, despite everything, I really truly find it interesting. And the thing is, when you look at a city through different lenses, it disaggregates itself in different ways, right? When you look at the city through a nocturnal lens, through बस नींद के नजरिए से अगर दिल्ली को देखा जाए, तो it's like it's a totally different city altogether that reveals itself. Similarly, when you look at it through the lens of air, it feels like a totally, through the lens of the brothers and the sky, and that's how the film started, through a kind of a abstract triangulation of air, birds, and humans. That's literally how it started. Roughly ये 3 coordinates है, these blobs है, and how do we figure out something that keeps zooming in and out of the very particular and the very general.
And it's also very interesting कि दिल्ली की फिल्म में ह्यूमन सेंटर में उतना नहीं है, और एनिमल है कि दिल्ली में जैसी सिटी है वहाँ पे ह्यूमन एक तरह से जितनी फिल्म है उसमें सब में कुछ एटमॉस्फेयर को समझने की किसी ने कोशिश नहीं की.
I mean, Delhi is is more of an instigator of thinking about the more than human, which is a kind of turn conceptually that came, I think, about say 15 odd years ago, which basically looks at the world without the human as the absolute reference point. So you think of the world as a kind of a through the perspective of the human non-human assemblage or through the non-human, right? तो वो एक perspective, एक नज़रिया देखने का जो कि increasingly और भी ज़्यादा relevant होते जा रहा है because of whatever you say, like climate change or whatever, or the planet itself, or suddenly it feels like, isn't it the case that we suddenly feel like the background of our lives, the wallpaper of our lives has suddenly become more vocal, more active, right? It's almost like something the you can call it the weather, you can call it something feels hostile or antithetical to our well-being.
Yes.
And it's almost like this, like Amitav Ghosh describes it as this feeling कि आप कारपेट में पैर रख रहे हो और एक्चुअली कुत्ते के पूंछ पे पैर रख दे और वो अचानक, और मैं लगा अरे ये तो कारपेट था पर एक्चुअली कुत्ते की पूंछ निकली. What you thought was inanimate turned out to be animate, right? Or the classic thing of Sinbad stops at an island and takes some rest and it turns out to be the back of a whale. This thing that you thought was not living, this thing that you thought was inanimate turns out to be intensely this thing, and you thought that you were having a conversation with just your human interlocutors, but it turned out that the phone was always tapped. There were always non-human interlocutors talking, right? So it was always this sort of a thing, and I've always been very this is all like this last formulation is Amitav Ghosh's, but this sort of a feeling was very interesting to me, that this feeling that we are all a community of air, like hum sab hawa ki biradri is what they say in the film, be it kites and all of this, and this to think of this city of Delhi especially as this broader kind of a thing in which humans are one aspect of it.
And also Delhi, like initially जब मैं यहाँ पे आया था, I think I came here for, it's very interesting, I came to Delhi for this call center work. So मैं जयपुर में रहता था and my ambition was to move to a big city anyhow. तो उस टाइम मुझे एक कॉल सेंटर का काम मिला, मैंने कहा आई विल डू इट, आई जस्ट वांट टू मूव टू अ बिग सिटी बिकॉज ऑफ दैट होल एस्पिरेशनल थिंग. तो दिल्ली में यहाँ पे आया था, तो यहाँ पे 6-7 कॉल सेंटर पे फिर मैंने काम किया. फिर गुड़गांव के भी कॉल सेंटर में एक जगह पे काम किया, वो बाद में भी मुझे पता चला दैट वाज अ स्कैम कॉल सेंटर. यूएस में उस पर केस चल रहे हैं, अभी कुछ हुआ, उस टाइम पे नहीं था. सो दिल्ली इज़ वेरी ऑल्सो, तो उस टाइम पे सिंस मेरे पास कुछ ज़्यादा काम करने को था नहीं एंड आई वॉज जस्ट रोमिंग अराउंड द सिटी मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम. सो इनिशियली या फिर 1 या 2 साल इस तरह के बीते, और इनफैक्ट JNU में भी थे तब भी. आई मीन इट वाज लाइक अ वंडरलस्ट काइंड ऑफ अ टाइम था वो भी, इधर घूमने फिरने का. दिल्ली इज़ अ वेरी रैंडम सिटी फॉर मी. लाइक मैं आते जाते लोगों की बातें सुनना उनना, या फिर बैठ के क्या देख रहे हैं क्या कर रहे हैं, तो एकदम प्योर रैंडमनेस में देयर इज़ अ लॉट ऑफ फन बिकॉज, और वो मेरे को इस तरह का रैंडमनेस कहीं और नहीं दिखा. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल बॉम्बे इज़ एक्सट्रीमली बिजी to be random, like people don't believe in wasting time. Delhi, the beauty is that people waste time, which is also closer to cinema, like wasting time like in terms of in the like in terms of mundane. So in even Bangalore में भी जहाँ पे मैं रहता हूँ, that is also very different kind of a monotonous singular vibe. So Delhi in that sense is more
variegated.
It's more artistic in that sense. There's a lot of scope. Like in
slowness is not sorry to cut you, like slowness is not for me. It's like every summer vacations मैं अपने parents के साथ Calcutta जाता था, because my grandparents used to be there and so on, and that seemed infinitely slower, like glacially slower. So and then Delhi would by contrast seem significantly pacier. So I wouldn't from my experience characterize it as that, but for me, if I really give you a personal take on it, for me I think it started a lot, and I think how I sort of curate my sense of self even now, consciously and unconsciously, has actually to do a lot with class. So I grew up in Defence Colony, and we were in a Barsati, and obviously Defence Colony is a very posh place, and my mum used to teach tuitions to kids. And my whole experience of growing up and playing cricket with kids in the colony and so on was the awareness that obviously everybody's more well off, and all those things and blah blah blah, that you feel like all of those things that happen because you're staying in a like around people who are significantly better off. And I felt like what happened is that it's this weird thing that the lower middle class always feels, that it has to, especially if you're Bengali, it's this desire to access some kind of cultural capital by saying that hum kitabein padhte hain. And it's something that is truly Bengali, right? That others might have more, um, others might be better off, or might have car or cable TV or all those things that one covets as a child.
Yeah,
But
Satyajit Ray or
yeah,
Ritik
but
Ghatak.
at least we have Satyajit Ray, or at least we have, which obviously much later I realized has its own very many caste privileges and all of that. But I'm talking about an earlier time, which was obviously in my personal consciousness prior to my politics being formed. And in that time, it felt like the only way to access something was to talk about how, like, books were a way to garner for myself some kind of, and this I'm sort of like self theorizing, but that I feel like my entry into a certain kind of relationship with books was through a certain relationship to knowledge, and to knowledge, be it in fiction or non-fiction. And I've obviously this is not something that I don't have an unproblematic relationship with, because obviously when you're in JNU, all of that gets problematized excessively, obviously, and there are obvious things we can speak about on this. But in a way, when I was growing up, I think class was a thing. In the recent time, my relationship to Delhi is entirely through the prism of grief, because I lost my dad very suddenly 2.5 years ago, and this is the city where I'm the only child, and I was singularly close to my dad, and it was really a bolt out of the clear blue sky. It was very surprising, and it's the place where I felt tethered to, because I felt a kind of responsibility, a huge deal of guilt, because I had to, like, very soon after, because of the film's Oscar campaign and so on, just leave the city for long stretches. So it felt like this sort of like main kind of peg for me here was a kind of guilt towards my parents. So these I've now feel like,
Guilt in the sense, like the responsibility wala guilt, or what?
oh yeah, I mean,
That kind of,
with
yeah, yeah.
grief comes all of
Mm.
those things, right? Like you feel like the very coordinates of your life has shifted. I shouldn't say guilt, I should say grief. But and that obviously is also a shape-shifting beast, and it's obviously changed now. But just to, because you are asking me what my main sort of points of ingress to the city are, it's, I think, my childhood through a certain relationship to books, because I was lonely and I was aspiring for, the truth is, cultural capital. It is as simple as that. And after that, it was my dad being whatever, like all of that, and some health issues and stuff. And other than that, a place of really great sociality and friendships, and a lot of plenitude in terms of, the casual drop in, which whenever you're outside, you can't do the thing ki kya kar raha hai, main aa raha hu, sort of a thing, right? Like that's something that for me is only available in Delhi.
But have you ever considered, like in the initial days, to move to Bombay to make films?
So the reason I got into non-fiction filmmaking is because it felt like non-fiction was far more hospitable and accommodating to people who wanted to do more personal films or slightly different kinds of films. And the simple truth is, I was just scared of the behemoth that is Bollywood. I was just honestly scared. I enjoy the films, but I was too scared of going through this rung of third AD, second AD, first AD, then all
Seventh
of
bhi
that.
hota hai aajkal.
I know. So, and I just didn't have it in me. And I got through FTI editing, but I didn't go for the main interview.
You didn't go for the main interview?
No.
Why?
And because it felt like Jamia allowed me to keep some options open, and I also did not, and thank God for that, because I did not want to leave. I was also interested in ideas, and I wanted to also study further while making films. So, Cities of Sleep happened while I was doing the PhD, and it's good because I mean, by the end of the film, I was absolutely physically, emotionally, financially spent and exhausted, but also exhilarated, as I'm sure you feel with your film, this sense that now I'm sure you're hungry to do more. right? I'm sure you're like,
अभी कुछ खुल गया बोला
Yeah,
अब बनाना है
it's like you've
daily
tasted
life.
blood,
Yeah.
right? And you feel this kind of madness, this
Yeah.
kind of crazy Herzogian delirium to make films. You know what I mean, right? And it's the social contract of filmmakers, wherein once you've made a film and the way that you have fought to make a film without a producer, you know you've been bitten now. And I felt that in complete rapture, where I felt like I was utterly now like up to karna hi hai sort of a thing. Once I sort of fell into series of sleep because I was interested in, I wanted to finish the PhD here,
Okay.
and I therefore did not, and I kept sort of deferring it as much as I can, and started this film, and this film was okayish, and then I wanted to make a fiction film, and I was in Switzerland for a fellowship for a bit, where I wrote a screenplay, but this film, All That Breathes, sort of out of the blue sort of fell in my lap because I was doing this fellowship in the UK at Cambridge, and I was housed in the Department of Human Geography, and everybody was working in, somebody's working on vegetation in Fukushima, somebody's working on polar bears, somebody's working on wolves in Chernobyl, and I got very interested in thinking about the more than human. And I was like, in Delhi, the more than human is like, it's resounding and like holding you by your collar and asking you to think about it, right? So that's how it sort of started. And then, of course, a film is like a free fall. You sort of. So, in a way, it's not so much a conscious rejection of Bombay. Now it has become a conscious rejection of Bombay. But prior to this, it was a kind of, let me see if I can squeeze and sneak and, pussyfoot around Bombay. And that's how it sort of never came to be.
Or your first film, when you finished it, and then obviously you released, and then what kind of response was there, like in terms of the audience and the festival and everything?
Remember that this
was it powerful enough to कि अब बस हो गया, we can do it? No.
Middle.
Yeah,
it was quite. I mean, at that time, I'd be totally lying if I said that I felt it was middle then. That time I was happy.
Okay.
Because you see, I got into. We went to Doc Leipzig, and then we went to Mami here, and then we went to, and we picked up some prizes at different places and so on, and I was really happy because this was a film that was made on a shoestring budget with me moving mountains basically to make it. That's how it felt, and therefore to be able to get it out and for people to see it, I couldn't believe my luck. The simple truth is that. But I also made it when it came out when I was 27. And the truth is I was very happy. Now in hindsight, when I look at the first films of various other people who are contemporaries of mine, now if you compare it to the first film, various other filmmakers or various other filmmakers, then you feel like, well, that film didn't do as well, but for the time I was quite happy. And of course, compared to this film, it didn't win a fraction of the laurels, but I was more or less pleased. Financially, it was hogwash. It was total hogwash, but honestly, it was fine because I was just relieved that it was out there. Because you really feel like you've lifted an impossible thing to first make the film and then to try and distribute it yourself, and because there's no distribution, this preceded the world of Netflix and all of that, to try and be trigger happy and proselytize the film as widely as you can.
So even in this whole like documentary filmmaking में you go daily for a hunt basically कि कुछ मिले जो editor को लाके मैं दूँ, एक तरह का hunting का जैसा process है, and there is unsurety, मतलब कितने भी दिन and you don't know कि कितना shoot करना है, and especially like I also read your कि जब तक कैरेक्टर्स ये ऑन करना ना शुरू कर दें तब तक शुरुआत नहीं होती, तो वहाँ से इसकी शुरुआत होती, कुछ कैमरा जब आप उनके सामने रखते हो वहाँ पे रियल का, सो इट्स अ वेरी लॉन्ग प्रोसेस, और जिसके अंदर मोस्टली यू नो दैट यू आर गेटिंग नथिंग, बट बीच बीच में देयर वुड बी स्पार्क्स कि हाँ आप कुछ मिला समथिंग लाइक दैट. इट्स दैट काइंड ऑफ प्रोसेस आई एम अज्यूमिंग. सो how to keep motivated every day कि आज भी जाना है if you don't have the funding,
motivation is not the problem in that sense. I don't know why you grimaced and said Are, kuch mil jaye. It's not like that actually. It's almost like this crazy delirious joyful thing on some days, and it's like swallowing blades on the others. So initially you have a vague sense कि you just go to your collaborators and say मुझे नींद पे फिल्म बनानी है और मुझे chill. That's all you say, right? So, and then slowly you sort of go to your characters and you try and explain the best you can that this is vaguely what you're interested in. And slowly the shape of the beast starts revealing itself. And like you correctly pointed out, the first month is trash. You found your characters, you're filming them, but obviously in the first month they're always like, hello brother, how are you? You know, it's very, they're very,
They're tight.
yeah, they're very like tightly held.
Mm.
And the main ambition of this form is to try and get a sense of everydayness, a kind of quotidian banal everydayness. You're interested in gesture that is like, shoulders have to be like this. And once you're a non-fiction filmmaker, you're very attuned to that kind of a thing. Like, you're very attuned to कि body कितना वो है, nostril कितना flare हो रहा है, कितनी फूल रही है. You know, it's like आँखों का iris कितना बड़ा. And that's when you realize कि कितना, like, the main ambition is to get this kind of a unself-conscious quality of dead time.
Yes.
Empty dead time. That's
Yes.
the main thing. What you want is nothingness.
Yes.
What you want is empty banality.
Hmm.
And that's what I mean. So the first 10 days, it'll always be a bit like, "Puzar dina?" You know, it's a little like very, very curated and aestheticized and all of that. Like, everybody's very self-conscious. Over time, you realize that bodies start becoming a bit this thing. Then a gali will come, a yawn will come. And once the joke in our crew, like you said, was that once a yawn comes, you're okay. You know that, okay, now hopefully material will start coming, because that's when, and the truth is it will come if you show up every day. If I shot you with all your media literacy, if I shot you the first 5 days, you'll be very, but life has a kind of a blunt force in that it just comes forth, and you can't hide who you are. If I shoot you for 3 years, you just can't.
Especially there is also fatigue of performance after a while.
There's performance fatigue, and it's also the desire to be witnessed. You know, human beings get really addicted to being witnessed.
Yes.
And I am sure in your podcast you often come like across moments in a few podcasts where for 2-3 minutes you feel like you've gotten the truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know why I spoke about my dad suddenly. I never speak about it. But something about being comfortable in a space that I know very well. I'm not holding my body like I usually do in interviews, because I know the space extremely well and so on. But it's that, and you as a non-fiction filmmaker also get addicted to those moments of pure authentic. It's not truth. Truth is a tricky word, okay?
Yes.
Nor is it objective reality. It's just authenticity. It's a taste of authenticity. It could be anything. It could be a guy just going just this, and it'll be riveting to watch if you catch it in its real pregnant possibilities. You know, it's that. And so the truth is that the first month you're just like, acha, kaise shoot? And the first month you're not sure of your cinematic language, your grammar. The characters are not sure. So the first month you feel like you hate every second of the footage you have, because characters are conscious, you're still figuring it out. So the first 3 to 4 months, actually, I was filming like this. I was on a handheld camera. It's only eventually that I realized, after about 4 months of shooting or filming, that I realized that actually what you want is that the form has to be intuitively connected to the content, right? Like, the grammar has to reflect or mirror the characters I was filming were just so contemplative. And have you guys seen the film? No, you have. Okay, so because the characters are obviously contemplative and quiet and all of that, when you do this, you know, when you're doing it's usually embodies the camera person in a felt, fleshy way. You know, it gives a kind of a sense of immediacy or restlessness, which is why in action films and Born Identity you'll see this sort of a style. Or even emotional films, so you need presence, like real, raw presence. In this film, I did not want that. In this film, the characters were very meditative and contemplative, and therefore it had to have Tehrav. And actually, the thing that I had to really dip into was not the world of non-fiction in the sense of the roving camera, but actually more the world of Tarkovsky or, Bellatar, or those kinds of filmmakers where you wanted a heavy camera. So I first said, acha theek hai, tripod pe, like these cameras are. Then I was like, nope, I feel like, and then soon it became a point where I was like, I feel like using the toys of fiction to tell a non-fiction story. So it should have the outer packaging of it'll be more interesting when you see the film. That if you it's the sorry, that sounded like a dick, but I meant like it's like the outer packaging has to feel like it, because you see docs don't usually use like a
Yes.
track
Yeah.
or a crane or a trolley, right? You don't usually use that, but we used cranes and tracks and so on because I wanted that kind of a aesthetic controlled image, and it was important for me that it had to be beautiful and it had to feel otherworldly and enchanting. And a lot of times, and this goes back to what you were saying about identity politics and a lot of identity politics being grim. And the thing is that one
No, it's
often
okay,
feels that, sorry, I'm jumping topics a bit, but one often feels like if you compare Indian non-fiction with, say, European or especially European non-fiction, it's almost like we are always carrying the burden of the social. You know, we have to tell the stories of poverty or all these things of different kinds of modes of identity in a really somber way, whereas my European
Like
counterparts are
mundane,
making these
nothing
delicious
happening.
films about
Existential things,
about
yes.
and existential things. You know, like why, or about poetry, or about, you know, and the ambition really was to try and find a kind of a intersection where it's as aesthetic and beautiful and you know, but not beauty at the cost of politics or character, but where you care about what the image looks like. And I care about, like, you know, let me put it this way, non-fiction is not just about journalism, it's as much about cinema, and I'm interested in cinema.
This was in fact my next question, like how non-fiction ke andar bhi there is a lot of confusion. Obviously there are so many genres of documentary filmmaking ki bahut sari genres hain, but there is also like what can be constituted as a documentary filmmaking. Do you have like this, at least this essence should be there in the documentary filmmaking to be considered as a documentary rather than, let's say, some kind of a news item or news thing? So is it like it should not just say the reality but also transcend the reality in sense, like as you said, that it has to have some kind of cinematic quality? So do you have any essence?
I mean, not in a blueprinty sloganeering way, not in a aisa hona hi chahiye ya nahi hona chahiye, nothing like that, but I meant that there's a certain world of documentary that you and I know, which comes from in India, which comes from the legacy of Patwardhan, Sanjay Kak, all of that, and it's a kind of work that all of us have to really value and feel rewarded by and all of that. But the legacy of filmmakers that I was interested in for this film is actually a different, like, I was not interested in that kind of aesthetic object, that kind of a conceptual object either. I wanted to make something that was philosophical, that was cinematic, and it should hold up as art, as highfalutin as that sounds. But I'm just telling you what I was really excited by and what I wanted to make. And not at the expense of the political, because the political is also in the film. Like it's always a kind of wallpaper in the film. So I was, for instance, if you look at Indian cinema, I was interested in. Have you seen Oshim Aluwalia's John and Jane?
That call center
one. So you know that, or like films of SNS Shastri or Sukhdev, or from that, or in the contemporary West, the films of. Have you seen Victor Kosakovsky?
I have seen the trailers of his, and it is
amazing.
Absolutely
it is
brilliant,
incredible. It is incredible because it's the best cinematography that I have ever seen. You know, it's like, and it's because of seeing Kosakovsky, where the cameras are locked right now, but I would say if you just like literally pan there's a Neil guy eating leaf
you
there.
Can pan this,
and
this one.
you can pan. Yeah. But the simple truth is, can you slowly pan from left to right? From left to right. Just do it. It's fine.
Okay.
Just do it.
Obstruction
it's fine. Just from left to right, from your left to right, clockwise. Move and do it.
No, you can. इसको उठा लो उठा के वैसे हाँ घुमा दो आराम से.
Yeah. You can just turn it there. Yeah. So this thing that this moment where life kind of unbridled really walks in, and you move as a kind of motivation where your eye goes from that Neil guy to that dog there to the dog on this thing, and then you'll find a squirrel niche, and then the camera just meanders and goes off somewhere and then slowly comes back to the human. And this is a kind of a fabric that one sees in Victor Kosakovsky's films, where the camera is unbelievable. It's just cinematographically beautiful, you know. But unfortunately, a lot of that cinema, my only quibble with it is that it is evacuated of the political entirely, or even of the human or of the emotional often. So I wanted to try and find, have you seen the films of Gianfranco Rossi?
No.
ये भी देखना, इसकी फिल्म में एडिटिंग को लेके बहुत अच्छी. इट्स लाइक एक फिल्म है नॉटर्नो करके वो, और एक और फिल्म है सैक्रो जियारे करके. इट्स जस्ट मोमेंट्स ऑफ पीपल्स लाइव्स, कोई स्टोरी नहीं है, जस्ट मोमेंट्स ऑफ पीपल्स लाइफ. 2 बंदे बैठे हुए हैं टेबल पे और एक बंदा मे बी धीरे से चाय पी रहा है. 1 मोमेंट. Somebody else is just walking somewhere and suddenly starts crying. So it's just vignettes of life that this person has accumulated over a year and then found a kind of harmony through it. And this sense that, like, excuse my talking in a more like hyper aesthetic way, but
No, it's okay.
this idea that cinema works best when it's not illustrative, when it's not denoting meaning in a direct way, but it's in a kind of oblique and tangential sense, where you know that it aspires then somewhere towards the poetic or something, where you know that there are certain moments you can pull out and say, okay, that is amazing, because it actually made me realize something about the world itself, not in a direct way. And my favorite films are films that are never about the plot. They're more about character or atmosphere. So they're never about the what, but always the how. And in that, especially non-fiction, when it tries to be about the how and not the what, it becomes really something else. It's like because it's, the political will one way or the other crowbar its way in, and usually dogs have an eye on it. But then when you also find, because then you're basically looking for moments of beauty in life. And for us, because we were shooting animals for 3 years, and remember, none of us have any training in National Geographic or Discovery kind of films, right? So, and nor did we have the ambition or expertise for it. And then you realize that obviously animals are deliciously disregardful of your designs. So you can shoot for 20 days a dog and nothing will happen, and suddenly on the 21st day something crazy has happened, and it rewards you with accidents and contingencies. So finding moments of beauty in that sort of a thing becomes something else. So which is why when non-fiction is about the aesthetic, to my mind it becomes really, really beautiful. And or older films like Koyaanisqatsi, or do you like Koyaanisqatsi? Or fiction films that become like non-fiction. It's like somewhere in the middle where they meet. A lot of the best of Kiarostami's films, a lot of Tarkovsky, a lot of these films like tend towards non-fiction moments. Where think of some famous Tarkovsky moment where it's just trees swaying in the wind, and it's genuinely beautiful. It's just undeniably beautiful.
Yes.
And why would you call that fiction?
Yes.
It's moments of ellipsis that have suddenly inserted themselves into, like, moments of non-fiction inserted into fiction, right? So, anyway, sorry, long-winded answer.
In fact, you briefly talked about that कि किस तरह की expectation होती हैं, especially foreigners को, कि Indian film कैसी होनी चाहिए. So now in 2024, like एक टाइम पे थी कि इस तरह का होना चाहिए, ग्रिम होना चाहिए, थोड़ी सी पोवर्टी और वो सारी चीज़ें होनी चाहिए, या फिर पॉलिटिक्स यहाँ की वैसी होनी चाहिए. तो अभी भी क्या वो जो फॉरेन गेज है एक इंडियन फिल्म्स को देखने की, या फिर इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंट फिल्म्स कैसी आनी चाहिए इंडिया से हमारी तरफ, is it pretty much the same? And the second thing is, since the funding opportunities are almost non-existent in this country and we are very much dependent on the Western funders, so does then our aesthetic also change to suit them?
Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, when people ask me about the Western gaze, it is true that most of the money comes from outside, but I think it is not. It requires more nuance to think about because a lot of the money is, say, coming in from Japan. A lot of the money is coming in from Korea, which is also a certain kind of gaze. It's not the Western gaze, though, right? So there are foreign gazes involved, or very often producers from Bombay making non-fiction have a different kind of a gaze also. So I think one has to disaggregate what one means by foreign to what, etc.
That's true.
In my experience, often there's a bid to universalize it more.
Okay.
And not so much be saddled down by narratives of poverty per se. I think that's a slightly earlier moment, because in recent docs, poverty has really not been the theme, but it's been the other vectors of identity. My thing has always been about the political, in that as if it's the flag bearing responsibility documentaries ki there has to be a very frontal, on the nose relationship to politics as something that is self evidently described. Whereas I feel like, films work best when they're Trojan horses. When you're able to sneak in the political in slightly sideways thing, where you're inaugurating a conversation with somebody who walked in wanting to dismiss you, but you've emotionally moved them and snuck in a conversation. And so it feels like the film is about non-human life, but actually it's also about other things that are happening in contemporary India. So I like it better when it's not super frontal, or especially when a lot of docs are overly screechy or pedantic, or hold you by the collar and say pay attention. So then I actually think it does more disservice than good, honestly. And I therefore prefer it when it's more oblique. And my favorite films are like that, actually. We were talking about... Anyway, that'll be a different...
I randomly remembered that film, Jafar Panai's This Is Not a Film.
Yeah, look, that is another level of coercion and censorship, obviously. But I mean, when a film doesn't kind of boil down in very strict ways or in a boilerplate way what the configuration of the political is, which is not to dismiss films that do, again, because I'm worried that people will then say, but what about, like, of course, everybody from Patwardhan to Nakul Sani to all of those guys are doing really important work, and actually they take off a lot of pressure of engaging with the political head on, and therefore other filmmakers can pile in A Night of Knowing Nothing.
Absolutely.
Me in this film can approach it in slightly sideways ways. In terms of the money thing, of course one would love money from India. Having said, look, this I don't want to give a usual news bite, because this is what everybody just asked me, obviously, but the quick version is that the so-called golden age of Indian documentaries in the last 5-6 years, obviously the needle has shifted somewhat. Our films have done significantly better than fiction films in the last 6-7 years. Significantly better, right? Except this year, when fiction has done superbly well in Cannes, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, the thing is that it's not like while during Series of Sleep, मेरे पास कोई जगह ही नहीं थी किसी भी streamer पे film दिखाने की. Now at least there is a place, but at the same time the non-fiction that has come in is actually far more about true crime or reality TV inflected stuff. So in a way, doors have opened, other doors have shut. So the kind of film that we were just talking about and have sadly moved away from talking about is basically it's a kind of creative treatment of actuality. It's creative non-fiction, right? Uski jagah thodi shayad kam ho gayi hai, but otherwise documentaries from India there's a lot of curiosity about.
But there is a curiosity and the golden age, quote unquote, but also there is the distribution is a major issue.
Of course, we are saying golden age because kuch ho raha hai. Okay, we are saying
so we don't see like for example your film I couldn't see because I don't know where
I think that is entirely up to you because it's been online for 2 years. But
there is no like even Pile's film I want to
as a benchmark. But
even Pile's documentary film.
Yeah,
you can't watch it.
That obviously is also probably more could be seen as more politically provocative, and therefore
maybe they don't want to
possibly that is the thing. But mota what I'm saying is that kuch cheezein definitely better hui hai, but I'm not overtly euphoric about it or overtly sanguine about it. I'm cautiously optimistic about it ki kuch cheezein better hui hai ki we're producing 4 documentaries at the moment, and I am more or less hopeful कि उन सबको जगहें मिल जाएंगी, मतलब there will be a home for these films, which a few years ago I would not have had the confidence to say. Is that to say that suddenly non-fiction has become significantly easier? No. There is more money, more than ever, that is coming in now, but still I'm meeting like 10 documentary filmmakers a month who've not been able to have the privilege of those resources, So it's better, but 1,000 miles to go, basically.
And how much it changes the opportunities, especially in terms of funding, like it drastically changes after Academy nomination.
Oh, for me, it's definitely a foot in the door. But let me put it this way: it's almost like it feels like there's a searing spotlight that got flicked off like this in some months. So it almost feels like, it feels unreal, and it feels like the people that you're meeting there, the kind of conversations you're having, you can't believe it. Like, a part of your brain is feeling like,
Yeah, what happens at Oscar? Please tell us. Nobody knows because we don't know
yeah,
what
sure.
happens.
But can you, do you want me to start from a specific thing? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Well, the Oscars, as in the ceremony itself that we see on TV, is the culmination of what is often a 6 to 8 month long process of. It's a little like, it's like a political election. You're basically running for office, right? And तो the procedure is कि शुरू में आपका जो ब्रांच है वो वोट करेगा. तो अगर आप जैसे डॉक्यूमेंट्री में हो तो आपको डॉक्यूमेंट्री ब्रांच वोट देगा. अगर आप कैमरा में हो तो सिनेमाटोग्राफी ब्रांच देगा, एडिटिंग ब्रांच देगा, ऐसे ऐसे करके डिपेंडिंग ऑन आप किस ट्रिब्यूटरी के पार्ट हैं. तो पहले सिर्फ आपका ब्रांच वोट करता है. सो द डॉग ब्रांचेस से 800 पीपल. Now, those 800 people are obviously distributed across the world. So for 6 months, you're going from place to place to place, from country to country, to basically do screenings and have meals and conversations with Academy members. Because everybody, it's like this well-oiled, glitzy, massive machinery. And the numbers that we're talking about is mind-boggling. It's like astronomical. Most of the times, a fiction film's Academy campaign budget is 2 times or 3 times the budget of a film.
Really?
It's that high.
Wow.
It's giant. And
that
for
campaign
us,
starts after your film gets selected, right?
well, it depends really. Remember that pehli voting of the dog branch of your branch in the Academy happens in December, early December. So, like, I started from the Zurich Film Festival, which was, I think, August end. तो अगस्त से लेके दिसंबर तक, एंड यूर बेसिकली इट्स दिस एंडलेस हैमस्टर व्हील. इट्स अ रिलेंटलेस ट्रेडमिल ऑफ होटल स्क्रीनिंग, Q&A, dinner, hotel screening, Q&A, dinner, flight, hotel, like constantly. And you're constantly like going from place to place to place, from country to country, just basically doing this. And I know that like, it sounds bizarre and weird, the kind of money that's being spent, and of course my characters are not seeing a cent of it, we are not seeing a cent of it. And what's happening is that जिनको मतलब एक भनक लग जाती है ऑस्कर्स की, वो एक इतना वेल एस्टैब्लिश्ड एक मशीनरी है दैट यू हैव बेसिकली कैंपेन मैनेजर्स एंड PR टीम्स जो कि स्पेशलाइज करते हैं इसमें, जिनके पास लाइक एक्सेल शीट्स हैं कि इस जगह में सैन फ्रांसिस्को में ये 14 लोग रहते हैं, इनमें से 12 ने देख लिए, उनका मे बी है, इसका यस है, इसका नो है. और इट्स लाइक थिंक ऑफ देम एज द प्रशांत किशोर्स ऑफ द academy world, by which I mean a strategist Prashant Kishore is the wrong this thing. Think of them as a campaign manager, like a political strategist of the this thing, कि जो कि basically उनका काम है कि फिगर आउट करना कि यहाँ पे कितने वोट हैं, सबके वॉर रूम्स हो रहे हैं, सबके हो रहे, सबको ज़्यादातर टॉकिंग पॉइंट्स दिया जा रहा है कि या एडवाइस किया जा रहा है कि ये बोल सकते हैं, वो बोल सकते हैं, एक्सेट्रा. एंड it's this whole process that you are basically going from pillar to post to campaign, like a political election, and you have people who are basically running your campaign for you. So it's like that. And then पहला round of voting होता है in December, जहाँ पे shortlist of 15 select होता है. After that, it's the nominations of 5, which happens in January, which is the big thing. It's the Oscar nomination, which happens in January. And I was in, this time when the nominations happened, I was at Sundance actually. And obviously it's like it happens at, I was in mountain time that time, and it happens at 6 in the morning, nobody sleeps. Obviously your life suddenly feels like it's changed. The next time you open your phone a few hours later, it's like Facebook with notifications and 999. It's like 1,000 people have messaged you, 1,000. It's like because what happens is that it feels like a social explosion, because everybody who has ever known you, some friend from nursery school, some childhood friend, some teacher, everybody is messaging because everybody's seen the news and everybody's happy, right? And which is not to say that you are feeling ecstatic, because obviously life doesn't work like this, and you know that whatever is meant to be materially really happy always gives you sadness, a tinge of feeling low. It's like, you know what I mean, right? It's like you feel these extreme uppy downy,
Overwhelming kind of a
but at
thing,
the same time you're still the same person, you still have the same autoimmune condition, you still have, it's all of those things are the same, and you're just exhausted. So it's this extremely schizoid thing of extreme highs and extreme lows, and you feel utterly discombobulated because you're like
a disease state of mind.
because you're constant, you're like, okay, up next half an hour may I have this much press, after that I have to catch this flight and I have to go here, and this I spent about 140 nights in hotels, and from
In US or around the world?
around the world, and from this vantage point, of course anybody watching this will say this is obscene, this is vulgar, this kind of money being spent. Obviously there's no denying that. There's absolutely unreservedly that there's something, but that's what the American system is, and it's neither our money, it's just a system throwing money at, because and it's not mindlessly throwing at it. Obviously there is that kind of value attached with thank you value attached with the Academy, because obviously once a film is nominated, its viewership also skyrockets exponentially.
Yes.
So it's not like it's a completely meaningless, it's not meaningless drivel for them, it actually holds material concrete value.
And the stories you were saying, that the experiences at the Oscar with people maybe whom you wanted to always meet and finally met.
So obviously there are many stories, and the ones that I would pick are, at that point it's like this dizzying sensorial overhaul, it's like this upheaval, right? And you feel like your life has melted and you've entered some planet of magazine front covers. That's the world that you feel, and you get a glimpse of it in Cannes itself. Like my physical premiere, we otherwise premiered in Sundance and then in Europe in Cannes, and there you see some jhalkiyan, some glimpses of Idris Elba or Kate Blanchett or something. You're just open mouthed and you can't believe it, and you all these like big directors that you whatever. But in the best part for me, and I think for a lot of people in the whole Academy trail, is there is something called the Academy Nominees Lunch, which is the best event in the whole trail.
That's before the award.
So that happens a month before the Oscars, the event. And what happens is that जितने लोग nominees हैं वो सब आते हैं for this long boozy lunch. और क्या होता है कि वहाँ पे press allowed नहीं होता. So obviously everybody can let their hair down and be, like chill. And also because there is no press, people, and everybody is a nominee, so everybody is respectful. Everybody is like a, there's
like
a real
all
sense
directors, actors, everybody.
Cinematographers, every single nominee of that Academy edition is called for a lunch at the Beverly Hotels, and you go there, and you if you're a doc, and you take a +1, so you can call somebody, and Ali Fazal had come with me. It was me, Aman, the producers, and this thing. And once you enter, the thing is that it's a small, it's one room, and wherever you're seeing, there's somebody, right? So, and I'm not even from Bombay, right? Like I see a TV star and get gobsmacked, right? You know what I mean, right? People in Bombay seem to be like cool cats about seeing stars.
Yeah.
I am definitely not a cool cat when I see at least somebody that I admire per se. But I think my top moments were that we're in the Academy nominees lunch and we're saying hello, and wherever you meet, there's somebody who's, and at some point I get introduced by somebody that we know to Colin Farrell, and I say hello, I'm I'd just seen Banshees, which I'd liked a lot, and I'd say what a great performance. And he said, I just saw your film last night. And I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I just blurted out, tell me what the first shot is. And he immediately said, it's the rats. And so, and he was extremely warm and very convivial. And sorry, look, I don't mean to name drop, but I'm just honestly telling you what was very transformative.
Please drop the names.
The most, and at that time I met Guillermo del Toro, who's also, in terms of art design, a big hero of mine, in terms of production design and art design. So I met him, and it was very nice, because I think the third or the fourth thing that he said was, have you seen any good films recently? Tell me the stuff that you love. And it felt like there's a genuine fervor and passion and love for films, and not in an artificial sort of a way. I met Tom Cruise. That's a bizarre conversation that I'll tell you off camera.
Okay, the audience is gonna miss it.
Yeah. But I can tell you that what was happening is that we were, everybody's talking to somebody, and Roger Deakins was there, who's also a huge hero. And then Ali comes to me and says that, "Bhai, sabka baap aa gaya," or something. And I turn, and it's almost like even in that room, jahan pe itne sare stars hai, Tom Cruise has come in, and it's like he's the sun. Like, people are orbiting around. Look, everybody's standing and listening now, right? Like, everybody's sitting at the back there. But suddenly, like, the story of Tom Cruise is just like, and it's the same kind of, there is that kind of whatever one thinks of his film, and that's a different conversation, right? But there is that kind of star appeal where everybody was sort of, and it's almost like, it felt like he's perfected the 1 minute conversation of really like holding your hand, give me your hand. And he'll do the thing, and he'll be like, and he'll be fully focused for that 1 minute, okay? And you can't believe that Tom Cruise is holding your hand, and and you're very conscious of everybody who's whatever, like eavesdropping or listening in, but he's fully focused and listening. And at the end of the minute, he'd be like, very nice, and hold both your hands, and you look down, and then he'll sort of leave your hand and move away, which obviously has to do because people will just keep on talking, right? So he manages this format of the 1 minute conversation,
art of 1 minute conversation,
fabulously well. And he was very, very kind, and I mean, I didn't find it disingenuous because he didn't make me feel like it was disingenuous, and it was very, it was, I don't know what it was actually, and one doesn't beyond a point care. It just, I walked away feeling
that
nice.
whole experience was
Spielberg, I didn't have a conversation with. It was like, too many people were there, but I had a conversation with Alfonso Cuarón, who's also a hero of mine, who'd also seen the film and thankfully liked it, and so on. So a lot of these kinds of interactions. My most prized interaction in this, I'm really mortified that people are going to say you're name dropping. So I hope like...
No. This is like, you see, everybody is listening with curiosity.
I think my most prized thing is a very heartfelt personal email that I got completely out of the blue from Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, really?
And that was it was very, very personal and all of that. So,
wow.
That
related
I think was
to the film.
He and it's meaningful because he's not on social media. He's not on. And I really love him as an artist. You feel like he's a actor's actor, right? So, and it's not so much about the stardom as it is about the pure, blunt force of craft. And I'm sure you'll, the quality of thing that one felt with Irfan, or the quality, what I mean, right? There is something that is distinct here. And with Joaquin, you definitely, I definitely feel it with performances like her and, really, really superlative performances. So that was superbly this thing. And otherwise, some other directors and actors and so on.
I remember meeting Eva, who's a filmmaker, very famous, Eva Duvernay. In Delhi. In Delhi, I met during the shooting.
Right.
So my experience was like the way that was also 1 or 2 minute of conversation, but she is making me feel like I'm the center and very important. That was very unusual for me because I was just a visitor with Suraj Engde, who was acting in the film. But that whole experience, I felt very good for many days. There are film makers like that who care about other people. Because in Bombay, it's, you hear the stories ki they don't care or kuch kar diya.
But I mean, I have a feeling like it depends on who you're talking.
Yeah, obviously.
But if you feel like, somebody who really likes cinema and you go and talk to them about a shot in their films or a shot that you really love and you think they really love, or a film, I find that the celebration of films as a social contract is a great conversation 1 minute. So, where you celebrate just one film, it could be of anybody's, it's like, मैं एक coffee के लिए मिला था J.J. Abrams से. Again, it just sounds terrible, but there's a
Yeah,
reason
please,
why I'm
please.
saying
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But I mentioned one of my favorite films in the world is The Double Life of Veronike. Kieślowski.
Yeah.
And it's a film that's the kind of lightness that one feels in that film, where you feel like it's just about
Yes,
touching something,
yes,
but
yes.
really not grasping. And this quality very few filmmakers have, where how tightly you grip an object. What your cinematic object. When I asked you right now,
Yeah.
I think before the thing, what is the molten core of your film? How confidently one is able to grip it, or if one just fleetingly or transiently touches it. As a kind of, like in classical music it says Anand, right? You don't possess it, you don't capture it, but you just fleetingly touch it. And
aesthetic shock, or that there's a
it's
word
just
for that.
a light sort of a caress, and that film really is able to get it in a way that I think is, masterly. It's just really, really something. And some films are able to get it. And I remember, talking about this to like some celebrated filmmakers, and they'd get it.
So I think light is going, so we'll just have two more questions. You explained about this fleeting joy in cinema, like absolute trance-like joy. So do you still in the contemporary film, like you are talking about the masters who were like Kieślowski, who were not making films now, but in the contemporary time, do you also feel in the cinema, like in the current cinema, these kind of moment, like wow, what a piece of
I think last year was a really good year for films. The 2 years before that were not great. Last year I think was an especially good year, and the last time I felt this, not awe. I don't know what the word for it. The word, Barthes has a word called punctum. Punctum का वो कहता है कि in every photograph, in some photographs, there's a quality which pricks you. It's like a puncture. It could be something, it could be a gesture, it could be a color, it could be something, but something that sort of jumps out and, does something to you. Not awe. It could be awe, but more than awe. Awe is one subset of it. So let's call it punctum. And the last time I felt it was probably Perfect Days. जो अभी Wim Wenders की film
movie
आई है. Last Hindi film I felt it in, I can't remember. अभी हाल ही में तो. Can you?
No.
What are the, like...
थोड़ा सा I felt during Jhund.
I haven't seen Jhund.
Jhund only because of that moment when there is a scene of Ambedkar Jayanti, so that was for personal reason, because I haven't seen that in a mainstream film, so in a theatrical space, so that whole experience became very emotional. But apart from that, I don't remember like in terms of the image making in Hindi filmmaking, no, since very long. But that is the whole thing, because now I think I see cinema in a very fragmented form, not exactly in the movies, but maybe let's say it's in some kind of a TikTok video, or maybe
but
some kind of a reel.
So do I.
In
I mean,
that moment I feel like blown away. Something I see in the image making.
It's not like a bastardized version at all.
No, I don't feel.
It's like it's not a cheapened version at all, because I feel like I've discovered a lot of stalker I have seen recently on YouTube clips. Like just one of the best shots in cinema, the entry into the zone, where you don't know from where it went from black and white to color.
Yes.
And it's that hypnotic, mesmeric shot.
Absolutely.
And it's like when you see those kind of episodes of it on YouTube, like episodically, it also still holds some kind of power. Or for instance, slow cinema, जो कि मैं हमेशा सोचता हूँ कि देखना पड़ेगा, but I often don't have the patience of when I'm watching. In a theatre I can see it, but if I'm alone at home at night, I can't bring myself to watch Lavdias to bhul jao, but Apichit Pong film also, but like sometimes I'll run out of patience. But I'd love seeing, like I actually recently saw Syndrome and a Century in parts, and I really enjoyed it still. Or Cemetery of Splendor, or though Uncle Boonmi I saw fully, but ऐसा कुछ नहीं. Even slow cinema I feel like I've seen in fragments, and it's excellent. It's really, really good.
So there isn't like the ritualistic quality कि आप पूरा बंद कर दो, एक भी sound नहीं आनी चाहिए.
नहीं, वो भी अच्छा है, because उससे, but there are different registers of meaning.
Yeah.
One is to get a broader emotional parabola of 90 minutes that the director intended for you to have. That's one thing. The other is to have a decontextualized snippet, like a free floating snippet that in itself has power, right? And those are two different meaning-making objects. Tell me films that or moments that you absolutely love. Like, tell me some stuff that you that you absolutely love. Should I give you some examples? For me, like the two that come to mind right now are, I think it's in Still Life, where the earth,
Still Life by Zia Zanke.
yeah, where two people are talking and earthquake hua hai and all of that, and पीछे टूटे हुए कुछ buildings हैं, and in the middle of the conversation, one of the broken buildings suddenly takes off as a rocket. And it's so beautiful, and it just like it opens up the film in so many different ways. Or in documentary, like my favorite Herzog moment is in that film in Antarctica,
Penguin
where that for the sake of the I'll just still say it out ki, it's a herd of penguins going towards the sea, and one penguin suddenly turns and starts walking towards what is the continent of ice, right? It's like, I think it's Greenland actually. It's like literally this the size of a country, that much ice. And every time you turn it around, it'll turn back and go towards what is certain death. And it's going to definitely freeze in a few hours to death. And Herzog, in his classic Herzogian hyperbolic voiceover, is going on musing about whether this is a mad penguin and can there be a deranged penguin. And then he says, why is it going that way? Is it suicide? Is it something like, is it self-harm? Is it like, what is it? And then in that classic Herzogian voice, he says, but why? And then you have operatic music and just this penguin against an ocean of ice. And it really jumps out. It's really, really fantastic. But that's still a grandiose sort of a moment. In personal moments, I like small... Anyway, I've spoken a little. What are your favorite moments?
Right now, let's say from Jarmusch film, there is a scene in Mystery Train. So where there are two strangers, I think they are Japanese couple, who travel to this city in US where Elvis Presley was born, and they are just roaming around the city. तो उन्होंने क्या किया, उनके पास 2 बैग है, तो उन्होंने एक डंडा ले रखा है और दोनों बैग टांग रखे और वो चल रहे हैं लाइक लिटरली. और वो शायद रॉबी मुलर की सिनेमेटोग्राफी है वो जितनी शानदार, और बैकग्राउंड में सिटी लाइट्स एंड दे आर स्ट्रेंजर्स हु आर जस्ट वॉकिंग इन द सिटी ड्रिफ्टिंग.
Jarmusch की फिल्म्स में walking is an amazing thing.
Like
I just recently with my cousin brother saw Down by Law.
This one my favorite film.
Just the people walking, it's incredible, like the bits in the mangroves, and it's just so
in
good.
fact, in the end, when they are surviving through it, it feels like some kind of a dream is going on. When they try to escape that whole prison, that scene, they are going into some other
I definitely
world.
feel this in some of, well, this is cliched, but in some Ray films also,
there are
moments of real beauty.
That Pratidwandi has I think that is one.
I mean, the way it shows a kind of like the ravenous hunger of the city.
And
anger and
mixed with surrealism,
and what
dreams.
The interview format becomes a metaphor of.
Yes.
Right? It's like, and it's such a deeply political film. It's just so deeply grim and political.
So on that note, I think we have to, although we can talk for a lot more, but right now because of the lights and everything, we have to finish it. Thank you so much, Shaunak, for coming to this podcast and speaking with me. You are super duper articulate, and I really, really enjoyed listening to you and learned a lot from you. And it's also so great that we are shooting this podcast where we have studied at this department, really School of Arts and Aesthetics at JNU. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
So just a final appeal that this is a listener sponsored podcast. So please, if you like our work, then support us on Patreon, buy me a coffee and other mediums. All Razorpay is also there nowadays. So please do support us there, and all the links are mentioned in the description box. Please do check them out. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast.